Formula One is a sport that rarely goes to plan when it comes to incidents on track. It's unlikely we'll see a race weekend that doesn't involve a spin, on-track collision, or some sort of mechanical failure somewhere, and we at GP fans would go as far to suggest that you'd be more likely to see Kimi Raikkonen come out of retirement and take another Drivers' World Championship than you would see the latter. But all of these incidents on track come at a price, and it's often a pretty expensive one for teams, especially for those struggling to attain the finances to hit the top level of the F1 budget cap. But how expensive are all of these parts to replace? Well, we've crunched the numbers for you and done all the hard graft. I'm Ollie Wilson for GP Fans, and these are the most expensive parts of a Formula One car. The steering wheel. It's not too surprising that one of the most important parts of the car for a driver and the team is one of the most expensive parts in a Formula One car, as the steering wheel kicks off our top 10. Unlikely to be affected as much as other parts of the vehicle in a crash or incident on track, the steering wheel kicks in at around $50,000 to $100,000 to replace, should it become faulty at any point over the racing weekend. Generally, these technological masterpieces are made from a mixture of carbon fiber and silicone grips to make sure the driver's hands are nice and comfortable over the full race distance, and those long practice sessions and pre-season testing sessions. The digital readout in the middle of the wheel gives the driver a host of information and messages about the status of the car, although it's probably advisable to stay focused on the road in front of you at 200 miles per hour than trying to read the tiny screen in the cockpit. Perhaps the most impressive thing though about the wheel is the number of controls and adjustments that the driver has at his disposal to make during the car at mid-race. From opening the DRS flap on the rear wing to changing the brake bias, launching the car from the grid at the start, or perhaps accidentally helping to lock the front brakes with the magic button like Lewis Hamilton in Baku in 2021, the wheel is a way a driver can make those minor changes to the car that can lead to big advantages on track. And let's not forget the gear shift paddles on the back of the wheel too. They're pretty important for an F1 driver. It's not often that the steering wheel gets broken, especially compared to other parts of the car, but when it does break, it can cause a host of problems. The rear wing. Something that can certainly get bashed around in an incident on track is the rear wing. Costing teams around $150,000 a pop, the rear wing is obviously a hugely important part of the car for generating downforce and helping with overtaking. Sticking out of the back of the car, hence it being called the rear wing, and weighing around 11 kilograms, the wing of the modern F1 car has to fit to the regulations of flexibility set out by the FIA, as Red Bull found out back in 2021 when the rigidity of their rear wing was called into question a number of times in the season. And of course, the wing plays a huge role in the excitement of race day as well, with the built-in DRS flap that can open up when a driver is within a second of the car in front, allowing less drag and thus a boost of speed, encouraging more wheel-to-wheel action. But if that doesn't work for some reason, or the rear wing of the car gets clipped, or you decide to send your car spinning into the barriers going backwards, it's certainly not a cheap repair job. The fuel tank. Problems with Formula One cars' fuel tanks are pretty rare, to be honest, and replacing them isn't something that is done too often. Built of Kevlar and polyurethane, these things are built to last in an incident, and probably a gunshot as well, considering the materials they're made of, although that's something that hasn't actually occurred in my memory on track or in the pit lane before. The cost of the materials and the maintenance of the part is what knocks up the price tag for one of these to around as much as the rear wing of the car, and a replacement one will set you back another $150,000. However, it's worth every penny, as any problem with the fuel tank will likely lead to a potentially fatal incident, and no one wants to see any more fireballs again on the grid. This was also the reason why fuel tanks were made bigger and in-race refueling was banned back at the end of 2009. The hydraulic system. Something that we've seen break down a number of times over the years are the hydraulic systems of F1 cars. The highly complex system is worth every single penny of the $200,000 it costs, allowing those in the cockpit to benefit from power steering while also being integral to parts like the DRS system, changing gears via the steering wheel, and plenty more. It also means that any sort of hydraulic system failure can bring a very abrupt end to a driver. I think it's fair to say that if you're driving what is basically a rocket loaded with jet fuel on wheels at around 200 miles per hour around a tight, twisting street circuit like Saudi Arabia, the brakes of the vehicle are going to be the driver's top priority, or at least one of them. Call me dull, but being able to stop the car is almost as important as getting it to top speed on more occasions than not. So, whatever the cost of the brakes, I'd probably want that money doubled just to make sure everything's working correctly. Coming in at around $200,000, a Formula 1 car's brakes have to knock 160 miles per hour off the speed of the car in just a few seconds as they approach the corners, and have to withstand temperatures of 1200 degrees, with hundreds of small holes and of course brake ducts being in place to prevent them from overheating under the stress of their job. They're not exactly efficient to build or run either, with a lifespan of around 250 miles before needing replacing, and an expensive construction process that takes place that can't exactly be done at scale at your bog standard factory. But it saves lives, so even though they're over 100 times more expensive than the brakes that you'll be sticking in your car at home, it's safe to say they're fairly essential. The exhaust system. Important for aerodynamics and adding an extra boost of power, the exhaust system is vital in harvesting extra energy from the output of the immense engine that it's attached to. Exhaust gases can hit around 1000 degrees Celsius, and the motor generator system built around the exhaust can harvest this heat and energy and store it as an extra power boost in the energy store or battery. Keeping the exhaust system nice and tight also adds to the aerodynamic advantages of the car for a little extra boost on the timing charts. However, should the system need replacing, it will be around $250,000. The front wing. Perhaps more battered and bruised than any other part of the Formula 1 car, front wings take the brunt of the blows when it comes to the majority of the on-track collisions. In fact, front wings are designed to brake in a controlled manner to lower the impact energy on the rest of the car, with more of the force being soaked up by the nose cone of the wing rather than the main chassis of the vehicle. Front wing end plates are all too often knocked loose, especially in the tussle at turn 1, with drivers so low in the cockpit and often unsighted at the extreme ends of their car and driving on instinct rather than knowing exactly how close the wing is to the car in front or on the side. But despite the frequency of their destruction, a front wing will still cost the team around $200,000 to $300,000, a price tag that adds up, especially if you're a smaller team on the grid that's struggling to hit the top end of the budget cap. The drivetrain. Okay, the big money is now hitting the table. The drivetrain of an F1 car can hit the 7-figure mark, with it including the clutch, drive shaft, and the hefty gearbox that weighs in at a whopping $600,000 to replace. No wonder Charles Leclerc was so distraught in Monaco 2021 when he damaged the gearbox after his Saturday qualifying crash, especially if that money was coming out of his pay packet. Clearly, any damage to the drivetrain of the car will result in a timely exit from the race, so it's essential to keep all of this in working order and replace what needs to be replaced when it's needed. But it's not something that team bosses or accountants want to see being replaced too often at around $1 million a pop. The monocoque. The section that houses the driver, the monocoque, is a single chassis that provides the main protective shell for the driver. Made almost entirely out of strong carbon fiber, their price tag can hit around $1.2 million and are almost indestructible with layer after layer of carbon fiber, keeping the driver safe in even the most extreme crashes. Whenever you see an F1 car seemingly collapse and crunch into a million pieces, It's the monocoque that stays firm, holds its shape, and allows the driver the majority of times to walk away from the incident. This section of the car has had an extra $20,000 added to it since 2018, with the introduction of the halo around the cockpit of the vehicle that protects the driver's head and has perhaps saved lives a number of times already, including in recent years Zhou Guan Yu's crash at Silverstone in 2022 and Lewis Hamilton at Monza in 2021. The engine. Of course, the beast that powers these monstrous motors in Formula 1 is the most expensive part of the car. $11 million will net you a Formula 1 car's engine, although I'm not sure that functioning ones are just available on eBay or down at your local garage. Now, this huge sum of money isn't just for the internal combustion unit alone, with the engine and power unit of the car consisting of a number of additional components, including the turbocharger, the energy store, the MGU, the battery, and more. A big crash or a power unit failure can cost teams millions in the blink of an eye as they watch their car go up in smoke, which is why you'll hear team radios to kill the engine coming very quickly as soon as it becomes apparent that something is wrong. At the end of the day, teams want to preserve their car as much as possible and stop any problem spreading throughout the expensive power unit. So are you surprised that perhaps the engine is the most valuable part of a Formula 1 car? We certainly weren't here at GP Fans. Do you want to know the prices of the other parts of a Formula 1 vehicle? Let us know in the comments section below on gpfans.com for all the latest news in the world of Formula 1 and GP Fans Global, of course, on social media.